for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Stanley pour les Canadiens, le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup!
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Tibi. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Marinaro, the Sick Podcast on this Thursday, November 14, 2024. The last time the Montreal Canadiens won a game in Minnesota, they won big by a score of 8-1. The bad news is that last time was the 20th of March, 2011. 13 and a half years later, the Montreal Canadiens tried to get a win in Minnesota, and it's going to have to wait. It did not happen tonight. As a matter of fact, the Canadiens did not only lose, they were shut out by a score of 3-0 to the Minnesota Wild, and we're going to talk about it in just a minute with Pierre McGuire. The Sick Podcast is brought to you in part by Energy Transportation Group. They are a leading full-service logistics provider serving all of North America. They're driven to be different. It's also brought to you in part by Bittt Tibi. They launched their new Ultra Lager. It's a refreshing, thirst-quenching beer perfect for the cool fall days. Only 90 calories, 2 grams of carbs, 4% ABV per can, available in a pack of 6 and 12 in grocery stores around the province of Quebec. Ultra light and ultra refreshing. And also brought to you in part by Playground. If you're looking for the ultimate entertainment experience, and I was there last week on Saturday, and chances are I'll probably be there this Saturday as well. Playground has it all. Gaming, poker, fine dining, live music, DJs. It's a great time, all with unmatched customer service. Why go anywhere else? Just minutes from downtown Montreal, across the Mercier Bridge. Playground, your top destination for fun. I talked to you about it a couple of days ago, but in case you missed it, I'm very, very happy to announce that Pierre McGuire will join the Sick Podcast exclusively for Montreal Canadiens post-game show coverage right here. So all the post-game shows that we're going to do, he is going to be a part of them. Now, if you're wondering about our other collaborators, nothing changes. For example, if Maxime Lapierre is a regular on Tuesday night after Canadiens games, he will be on the Sick Podcast, and Pierre will join us a little bit later on. We'll probably we'll see how it goes. It's going to be, and sometimes we'll have everyone together. Anything's going to go here in the Sick Podcast. And Pierre McGuire is brought to you by Vago.
The McGuire Report. Presented by Vago Italian.
And we want to thank restaurant Vago on Green Avenue, corner of the Maisonneuve in Westmount, of course. And I'm going to talk to you about them a little later on. Pierre, good evening. How are you?
I'm outstanding, Tony. Great to talk with you. And I watched the Montreal Canadiens game after I worked a game in Amherst, Massachusetts between Providence College and the University of Massachusetts tonight.
Wow. Okay. Isn't that something? A busy man you are indeed. I was wondering, I said, did he wear the shirt and tie for me? I figured it wasn't the case, but pretty good reason. Pierre, the Canadiens lose, and look, there's no shame in losing to the 10-2-3 Minnesota Wild. And I really understood tonight why they're 10-2-3. They're big, they're strong, they're fast, they're talented, and they play as a team. They cut down the shooting lanes. They block pucks, whether it's with their stick or their knees or their teeth. They'll do whatever they can to insulate their goaltender. They really play a solid team game, Pierre.
They're really well coached by John Hines. I talked to their excellent general manager, Billy Guerin, this afternoon with Jimmy Murphy on our other Sick Podcast, The Eye Test. And Billy was talking about the team building exercise that he went through, whether it was adding Brock Faber, going out and getting Jacob Laukow from the Boston Bruins, adding Yakov Trenon. You look at some of the players that he's added. It's to your point, Tony. They're bigger, they're stronger, they're faster players. And then you look at the top line, Marco Rossi, the patience that went into Marco Rossi and his development. The former Ottawa 67 playing on a line with Zuccarello and Kaprizov. Kaprizov right now, it can be argued, is the MVP of the National Hockey League at this time. It doesn't mean he'll be there at the end of the year, but you can make that argument about him. So your point is so spot on. They're big, they're strong, they're fast, they're skillful, and they're extremely well coached.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. You just named a couple of names there that are not household names to the average NHL fan. We're going to bring up Minnesota's roster because I want to dissect it with you if I can. And here it is. All right, okay. So Marco Rossi with Zuccarello on his right and Kirill Kaprizov on his left. By the way, Matt Zuccarello took a puck up high early on in the hockey game, left the game, and never came back. He only played 3 minutes and 15 seconds. Now listen to this, Pierre. Joel Eriksson Ek, who centers the second line, with Boldy on his right and Marcus Johansson on his left, he gets tripped up. He goes to the locker room. He never comes back. He only played 3 minutes and 43 seconds. The Minnesota Wild played pretty much 2.5 periods with 10 forwards instead of 12. And they shut out the Montreal Canadiens. Okay, the third line of Gaudreau with Hartman and Foligno. And the fourth line, and I'm going to try and pronounce the name, even though I know I'm going to get it wrong. I spelt it out phonetically here, I think. Kushnutinov. I got it wrong. I know I did.
Kushnatinov.
Kushnatinov. Okay, thank you. And you talked about the other two players on that line earlier.
Trennan and Lauko.
Trennan and Lauko. Pierre, what I'm getting at is they're not household names, but that third line is big and heavy and gritty and very aggressive on the forecheck. And that fourth line, they finished their checks. The Minnesota Wild's third line and their fourth line have an identity, Pierre. And I think the Montreal Canadiens do not.
Not at this point, they don't, but I think eventually they're going to get there. I look at Luke Tuck and what's going on. Tony scored a goal in Rochester last night. I think he's evolving into a very good depth player at the National Hockey League level, even though he's in the American League right now. I think Florian Jacki is another guy that could eventually evolve into that kind of a player, an identity player, whether it's a third or fourth line player. I look at Owen Beck, Tony, down in the American Hockey League. I think he's evolving into either a second or top third line player. So there's stuff coming along. And Michael Hodge at the University of Michigan. But right now, I would agree with you. Their depth players haven't really created an identity for the team.
Pierre, there's some stuff going on with the ice time that I really didn't understand tonight. We're going to get to that a little bit later. And I'm talking about the power play. I think you already see me coming from a mile away. Let's bring up the Canadiens lineup if we can. All right. Suzuki with Dach and Slavkovsky. Evans with Caulfield and Newhook. Dvorak with Gallagher and Anderson. Condotta with Armia and Heineman. Gooley on the left, Matheson on the right, Hutson and Savard, Jacki and Struble, and Montembeault got the start in goal. What am I getting at? What I'm getting at is the Canadiens had a very key power play in this game. They had a couple of them, and Lane Hutson is still on the second wave of the power play. Now, Pierre, I understand the Canadiens' power play going into the game doing really well. 9th in the league, over 23%. But there were some players tonight that on the power play or even in the game were not going. And my question to you is, when you have a first wave of a power play, but it's clear as day that for some guys it's not working tonight and they're not going, do you still keep on going with your first wave hoping to get them going?
Every coach is different. I personally did not believe in that. And there was no secrets amongst our players, whether I was an assistant coach or as a head coach. I would make sure that we had guys that wanted to be part of it. Being on the power play is an honor, and it's an honor you have to earn every single shift. Now, every power play is not going to work, and the top power plays usually are between 25 and 30% efficiency. But at the NHL level, there are not a lot that are going to be at the 30% efficiency, so they're not all perfect. But I would just say that at some point here, and Tony, we talked about this a long time ago. I remember telling you that Lane Hutson should be on the number one power play, and that was going back into the summer and even into last spring.
Yeah.
And I don't know why there's this hesitancy not to have him there, because I do think he can make a huge difference and get guys going.
Okay, so in the hockey game tonight, Michael Matheson played 28 minutes and 19 seconds.
Yep.
Lane Hutson played 2016. So Matheson plays 8 minutes and 3 seconds more. And okay, I get it. Matheson's on your first duo of defense and Hudson's on your second. Not to mention that Hutson picked up a penalty at one point. Okay, got it. But Matheson plays 412 on the power play tonight, and Lane Hutson plays 147. And I don't know if I was watching a different game tonight, because believe me, I know that Lane Hutson wasn't perfect tonight. As a matter of fact, he's the only Montreal Canadian to finish the game at -2. Having said that, tonight, out of all the players that were on the ice, I found that every single player in the game, with the exception of 2, were playing chess. And the other 2 that were playing checkers were Kaprizov and Hutson. They were doing things that others just weren't able to do. That's the way I saw it tonight, Pierre.
Yeah, no, we agree. I mean, I totally agree with that. Lane's he processes a game at a different level compared to most players. Now, I'd say on the Canadian side, too, eventually I think Suzuki will get to that level. I think Cole in a scoring situation can get to that level, but there are not a lot of other guys who are going to be able to do that. That's not what New Hook's about. That's not what Kirby Dach's about. You saw Kirby Dach in the third period have a great burst to the net. He just wasn't able to put the puck past Gustafsson, because Gustafsson came and weighed out and challenged him. If, it's a different player, he might just slide that puck by Gustafsson or take an extra step and fool him short side. So it's just, there are not a lot of guys that are processing the game the way you just talked about, and I would agree with that. I don't know why there's the hesitancy to play Lane on that first power play, but eventually I think they're going to have no choice but to do it.
All right. So at one point, it was a couple of weeks ago, the Canadiens went into Pittsburgh on a Saturday night.
Yep.
And they lost that hockey game by a score of 3-1. There was an empty net goal. And Marty St. Louis, I think it was after that game that he said, we played a lot better defensively tonight, because obviously they had to shore up, because the game before that they had given up 8 versus Seattle, I think, pardon me, the loss to Washington, correct, where they gave up a ton of goals. I think they gave up 6. They gave up 8 couple of nights before that versus Seattle. The week before that, they gave up 7 versus the New York Rangers. And Marty St. Louis, following that loss versus the Penguins, said, we played a lot better defensively, but we still have to try and find that balance where we play a lot tighter defensive hockey, but we still have our share of scoring chances, our share of shots, and our share of scoring chances. And then he added, he said, if I didn't put so much emphasis on tightening up and playing a better defensive game, we probably would have won the game 5-4. Now, that remains to be seen, obviously, Pierre, but we have to try and find that balance. I thought the Canadiens played an excellent defensive first period tonight, where they limited Minnesota to only 4 shots. The problem is the Canadiens only got 2 shots, and both shots were by defensemen, Gooley and Hutson.
When you're way past the halfway point of a game, like Montreal was tonight, and you only have 9 shots in the game, that's a problem. Because in the NHL, on average, you're scoring 1 out of every 10 shots on net. So if you've only got 9, you probably don't even have a goal yet. And that statistic stood out tonight because they got shut out. And what did they end up for the game, Tony? I think 18 or 19.
19 shots, Pierre.
Yeah,
they had 2 in the first, 6, maybe even 8, 6 in the second, 10 in the third. That actually equals 18, but I have 18 in some score sheets and I have 19 in others. Right. So 18 or 19 shots. It all depends if there was an adjustment that was made. But to add to that, Pierre, on the shots, I have something for you. Before tonight's game, the Montreal Canadiens averaged 24.5 shots per game. You know where that ranks them? Dead last in the league.
Bottom. Yeah,
dead last, Pierre. Dead last.
Near the bottom. There's a couple stats that I look at. Shots on goal is one of them. Now you'll have a different team. You'll have an outlier like Carolina, who just throws pucks out. They had 50 shots on goal last night when they played in Utah. They lost the game, but you can't really judge it because their shooting percentage is 24th in the league, even though they're number 1 in the league on getting pucks to the net. Then you'll have other teams that manage the puck better. They create a lot more. And they'll, like the New York Rangers, for instance, will be one of those teams. So every team's a little bit different. But here's what I would say. If you're not getting between 26 and 32 shots a game, your chances aren't very good to win. And then the other stat I look at a lot, Tony, is goal differential. And I think going into the game, the Canes are right near the bottom with the San Jose Sharks in terms of goal differential. And they didn't help themselves tonight. They added another 3 to their minus. And that's a stat that doesn't lie, because it talks about your offensive productivity and your defensive productivity.
Yeah. Pierre, when you don't have the most talented team, chances are you're not going to possess the puck most of the game. So to possess that puck most of the game, you're chasing. And when you're chasing, if you want to get that puck, you have to chase it down, but you got to win puck battles. The composition of this team, Pierre, and I know you said they're going to get there, and I hear you, right? You talked about Florian Jacka, you talked about Luke Tuck. They drafted Thorpe, who's a big boy, and one day he'll probably play on this team as well. And you're bang on. But, like, for example, if you can't have Luke Tuck or Florian Jacka up with the big team right now, shouldn't you go out and try and acquire players like that right now instead of having Heineman and Condotta, for example, on your fourth line? You know, Armia's there. They're going to end up trading him before the deadline. I mean, I like Emil Heineman, but I don't see Emil Heineman entering in the top 6 on this team. So if he's not going to enter in the top 6, is he the best that you can have around the National Hockey League on your third or fourth line? I don't think so. Should they not go on and acquire these players?
That's not going to be his role ever. He just doesn't play that way. You know, the identity lines are guys that bang. You know, I'll give you one example. The New York Rangers, when they're really going hard, Philip Hedl's had an amazing breakout year. He's been really good. Will Cooley's been really good.
I love Will Cooley.
Yeah, you know, so they're guys that play with impact. You look at the Winnipeg Jets with Lowry at center, with Appleton on right side, with Nino Niederreiter on the left side. There's an identity there, Tony, if you buy what I'm saying. The Kings don't have that yet. Now, do I think help's on the way? And I gave you some other names, but I'll give you another one. Sam Harris at the University of Denver. He's an outstanding player. He's a big guy. I saw a guy, Logan Sawyer, tonight score the winning goal. He's a third-round pick from 2024 playing for Providence College. He's a big kid, 6'1", 185. By the time he's ready to turn pro, he's going to be 190, 195. And he's a big, solid kid. So there's stuff coming that I think could be part of that. But, again, they don't have it yet. So they go into second period. Lane Hutson turns 2 players. All right. He turns the player whose name I cannot pronounce the first time, so I'm not going to try to attempt it the second time. Usatinov.
Because that's the guy. And then he goes around Zach Bogosian like he's not even there. And then he circles the net. He comes in front. Mm-hmm. He hasn't scored a goal yet. Takes a shot. And, of course, Gustafsson makes a huge save. But what a play that was. And then, you know, Kaprizov's got a 2-on-1. He played so well, Kaprizov, but that 2-on-1, he played it really badly. For whatever reason, he wanted to pass the puck to Johansson with all the time and space that he had, and he was cut off by Michael Matheson. And then the first goal of the hockey game. Dvorak passes the puck to Hutson through the neutral zone, but he passes it behind Hutson. So now all of a sudden, it ends up in the Montreal Canadiens zone. Goes from one player to another. It ends up on Kaprizov's stick, who goes behind the net. Dvorak gives him some space. He spins and turns. He passes the puck to Johansson, who's being covered by Savard, who quickly passes it over to Boldy. It was a tic-tac-toe. Pierre, what a beautiful goal. You can break it down a lot better than I can, but your thoughts on that goal that gave Minnesota the lead?
No, but I think you're spot on in terms of your description of the play. Again, I talked to Billy Guerin this afternoon when we did the eye test, and the truth of the matter is, when I had Billy Guerin in a hockey camp when he was 14 and 15 years of age, I've seen him develop over the years, and I'm looking at Matt Boldy, and I've seen Boldy for a long time, and there are a lot of similarities. The one thing I would say, and even Billy would agree, that Matt Boldy has way more offensive creativity than Billy did. And so you're talking about a big body that's getting bigger and stronger all the time. He's a hard guy to contain. And he's feeling it right now. Matt Boldy's had a tremendous year, Tony, and he's not going to stop. He's just going to keep getting better. That's a hard play to defend. It's a really hard play to defend. It's a bang-bang play, and it's faster than the eye can even process it.
Pierre, I got to tell you, on RDS after the second period, Vinny Damphousse exposed Kirby Dach. Like, he called him out, and he called him out pretty good. And he showed a sequence where Dach goes for the puck. Spurgeon has the puck. There's very, very little effort from Kirby Dach, hardly a puck battle. So 1v1. Jared Spurgeon is 5'9", a buck
the
80,
size of Kirby.
probably, right? Kirby Dach is 6'4", 225 pounds, and Spurgeon gets the puck over to Chisholm, who gets the puck out. Now, Spurgeon takes off the other way as Minnesota's coming out of the zone, and he's starting to gain speed through the neutral zone. He gets the puck back. Kirby Dach is like just coasting back and leaves him to one of his teammates. And he doesn't pick up anyone on the back check whatsoever. He doesn't tie anyone up whatsoever. And Vinny Donfus calls out Kirby Dach for a lack of compete. Pierre, you talked about a better third period for Kirby Dach, but I got to tell you, that instance in the second period, that was a lack of passion. That was a lack of compete. It was a lack of effort, desire, and engagement. It's really bad. And like, I get it. Kirby Dach's coming back from a very serious injury, but that shouldn't affect his effort or his heart and his compete, should it?
No, absolutely not. But that raises the point. You know, the coaches saw the same thing that Vinny saw, and the same thing you saw, and the same thing I saw. So why do you think I brought up the improved effort in the third period? Because I'm sure somebody, whether it was the assistants or the head coach, somebody planted a seed of doubt in his brain, saying, "You better get going, son." You know, or the next result might not be the thing that you're wanting to have happen to you. So I agree with everything you guys have said. And I don't know how much pain he's in. I don't know, how on a percentage point, is he at 80%? Is he at 90%? Is he at 100%? I don't think he's at 100%. But where is he? But this takes time. But I would tell you this, what you just said is spot on. That shouldn't determine your effort. It should not.
Pierre, I know the Canadiens are in a rebuild. I get it. And I know that Kent Hughes prone for patience a couple of days ago. I'd be willing to bet, though, Marty St. Louis talked about hard coaching. We were going to see some hard coaching at some point. I haven't seen a lot of it, Pierre. I really haven't seen a lot of it. Like, if I'm Jeff Gordon or I'm Kent Hughes and I see those lackluster efforts, the lack of passion, desire, and compete from a Kirby Dach, but yet I continue to see him rewarded on the first wave of the power play, him as well, I'm not happy. I can't tell my coach how to coach his team, but I'm not happy. I mean, how do you want to make guys accountable if they're dogging it and you reward them?
I don't think that will continue to happen. That's why I think there was a conversation that took place after the second period. Now, we'll see whether that plays out or not, but he was a different player effort-wise, and I would agree with you. And I'm not a big fan of placating nonchalance. Nonchalance doesn't help you win, especially in a rebuild, and it doesn't help you keep your job in the league. Urgency helps you keep your job in the league, and we haven't seen a lot of urgency from a few guys, and Kirby Dach's one of them.
The Sick Podcast brought to you in part by Betway, a leading global online betting and gaming brand. Follow your gut instinct. Go with Betway. Go on Betway.com or scan the QR code to join the action. Must be 18 years of age and play responsibly. All right, okay. In period number 3, that's a bad break for Jaden Struble, who gets a stick up on Spurgeon, who gets cut open. 4-minute power play for the Minnesota Wild. The Canadiens do a tremendous job on the penalty kill, only to get scored on with 4 seconds left in that power play. You brought up Marco Rossi. He goes glove side, top corner.
Well, first of all, that was a heck of a shot, number one. Number two, as much as we want to credit Montreal for that penalty kill, and that you should, if I'm John Hines and I'm picking apart my team, watching the tape either tonight or tomorrow, I'm not happy with that 4-minute power play at all. I know they score on it later, but I'm not happy with that power play at all. It wasn't designed properly. Guys were freelancing. There weren't enough people shooting the pucks. They were making lazy decisions with their passes. But Montreal deserves credit for holding them off for as long as they were able to. The one thing I'd say about Marco Rossi, and this speaks to where the Canadiens will be down the road, Marco Rossi has been a significant work for their development team. And it paid off finally this year. It's been a while that they've had Marco Rossi in that organization. And for whatever reason, nothing was clicking until this year. And it just shows you the patience they had. And I talked to Billy about that today, Billy Guerin about that today. And, Matt Hendricks is one of the guys that works with their players a lot, and you can just see he's a guy that's finally it's kicked into gear for him.
Well, with 5 goals in 60 games, Pierre, he's on off to the best start of his NHL career, on pace for his best numbers. But he had 21 goals in 82 games last year. That's nothing to spit at. I mean, 21 goals and 40 points.
They were expecting a lot more.
Before, for sure they were. I mean, here's a guy who put up 120 points when he played for the Ottawa 67s.
That's correct.
But after being drafted, Pierre, this guy had a couple of stints in the American Hockey League. Just goes to show you, right? 63 games with Iowa, comes back up, plays 19 with the Wild, plays another 53 games with Iowa to finish off the season, and all of last season in the NHL. And so far this season in the NHL, but a couple of stints in the American Hockey League for Marco Rossi.
And that's why I'm bringing it up. They showed patience. And I can tell you, it wasn't just the American Hockey League. They had him in their development camps. And usually if you're a lead pipe cinch to make the NHL team or be a first-round pick, you're not going to more than 2 development camps. He's gone to more than 2 development camps.
All right, okay. So he scores top corner glove side. I think the Canadiens were a little tired on the penalty kill, and Jake Evans goes to the point man, and he can't go to Marco Rossi. David Savard is stuck. What do I do? Do I go up to him or I try and stay back? He gave him a little bit too much space. He couldn't block that shot. By the way, I think that's a big difference between the Minnesota Wild and the Canadiens. They seem to get their sticks and their shins in front of a lot of pucks, Pierre. Like a lot of pucks.
Yeah, they got a lot of big people back there, too. And they don't, outside of Spurgeon, they're no small guys. Brock Faber's a huge guy. John Merrill's a huge guy. Middleton is a gigantic guy. They got Chisholm. You talked about him before. He's a big guy. I mean, they don't have any small guys outside of Spurgeon back there. Jonas Brodin, when he plays, he's a big guy. I mean, they got a lot of big guys back there. It reminds me a lot, Tony, and I know imitation's the finest form of flattery, but if you go back to the 2019 Stanley Cup that was won by St. Louis, go look at the size of their defense. If you go look at the 2018 Stanley Cup that was won by Washington, look at the size of their defense. You look at the last cup won by the Vegas Golden Knights in their only cup, look at the size of their defense. There's one thing that a lot of teams that are having success, they got big people on defense. They got a lot of big people on defense.
If you take a look at that Montreal Canadiens team that went to the Stanley Cup final and didn't win, take a look at the size of their defense. Shea Weber, Ben Sherratt, Joel Edmondson, Jeff Petrie. They were big. John Merrill.
I had Tommy Fitzgerald on. We had him on the eye test too, Tommy, earlier this week, Tony. I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but we were talking about Jonathan Kovacevic.
Yeah.
And he's like, we had a shopping list, and we wanted to get bigger. So they did. They brought in Brendan Dillon, and they brought in Jonathan Kovacevic. The New Jersey Devils are one of the top teams in the NHL right now, and it's because they are big on defense. They've got a player playing in Utica, Seamus Casey.
Yeah,
he's 5'9". He's almost the same size as Lane Hutson. He scored a couple goals over in the Czech Republic when they opened their season against Buffalo. And they said, you know what, when we get all our guys back, you're going to the American Hockey League, and we're going to have our big guys in the NHL.
You got to hand it to the New Jersey Devils and Tom Fitzgerald, because a couple of years ago they finished Pierre? They finished like 8th or 9th in the National Hockey League. They had a fantastic season. Yeah. And last year, they really struggled. So what did they do? They said, why are we struggling this much? And they realized we're too young and too raw in defense. We got to go out and get guys. And I think they went out to get Pesci too, right?
Yeah, they got Pesci.
So, I mean, they went out and they got 3 defensemen. They got 3 defensemen with a lot more experience than what they had before. And now they're a top 3 team in hockey right now as of the 14th of November. It's a pretty cool story.
And they got 2 veteran goalies. One of them came from Montreal and the other guy came from Calgary.
Yeah.
So you look at it, Markstrom's pretty good. Allen's pretty good. And so they're in a good position right now. They're a fast team too. They're not big and slow. They're big and fast.
So I know that Canadiens fans were livid when there was Hartman's leg making contact with Lane Hutson, who falls down. I'm not going to go out and suggest that Hartman did it on purpose, because I think that Lane is so shifty that it's possible that just changing direction at the last second that they got tied up there. But tell me how you saw it, because Hartman clearly, though, did have an objective to punish Hutson because he kept on going after him and he kept on hitting him and pounding him into the boards. No one was doing anything. Lane had to be able to fight for himself, and out of frustration turns around and gives him a little, glove to the face. Boom. And he's the guy who was called for the penalty. How did you see the whole thing going down?
They always get the guy that retaliates. They never get the instigator. They always get the guy that retaliates. You got to know Ryan Hartman. Ryan Hartman plays on the edge. People in Montreal, if he was playing in Montreal, they would love him. He's one of those guys that plays right on the edge of the line. I don't think he's a dirty player. I think, like I said, he's a guy that plays in the line. In terms of Lane, I get the frustration. I saw it at the end when he did take the penalty. I think they're just a frustrated group. Tony, I had a chance at the Hall of Fame the other night to be with Shea Weber, Brendan Gallagher, Paul Byron, and Nick Suzuki. And I listened more than I talked. But I was listening to the pride these guys have in wearing the sweater. Oh, Carey Price was there as well, now that I remember. How much pride they have in wearing the sweater, how much they love representing the city of Montreal, how much they want to make a difference. Now, obviously, Carey and Shea can't do that anymore, and Paul either. But hearing Nick talk and listening to Brendan talk, it gave me a lot more optimism, depending on how people see it. But I'm just telling you, I know it's frustrating for the fans, but it's coming. It's more patience more than anything else.
All right. Okay. The fact that, and I get it, Lane's going to have to stick up for himself at one point.
Yeah.
But Josh Anderson's on the ice. Newick's on the ice. No one does anything right away. Once the play gets whistled down because Hudson's getting the penalty and he's going, then, Anderson goes to exchange a few words with Hartman and tells him he's not happy. Pierre, if teams are going to keep on going after Lane Hutson, I mean, how do you?
Well, there's a couple ways you do it. One, you make sure that you have a designated guy, whether you want to call him a sheriff or whatever, and he knows what his role is. The other way is your tough guy goes up to their star player during a timeout, whether it's a TV timeout or an offside face-off or a face-off, and whispers at him, if they keep going after our guy, I'm coming after you. And usually, not always, but usually that can stabilize a game. And keep that nonsense from happening. But eventually they're going to have to do something. They can't continue to allow Lane be a targeted player. They just can't. Now, Tony, guys like Raymond Bourque and Bobby Orr, they were targeted players. Brian Leach for a long time was a targeted player, but Jeff Bukaboom did a good job protecting him. I can go down the line, a great defenseman. Drew Doughty's a target every single night that he plays. So, Quinn Hughes in Vancouver, but Rick Tocchet's is not going to let that happen. And I think internally they need to talk about that.
All right. Okay. Look, with all due respect to Josh Anderson, who did give it to Tom Wilson.
Tom Wilson, yeah.
Pretty good. I mean, that was really something. The wires touch for Josh Anderson. He showed the hockey world just how strong he is or can be when he wants to. Mm-hmm. But I get the feeling that Arbor Jacka probably feels for the most part like he's alone on an island, and they've tempered him, Pierre, and it looks like he doesn't want to do anything anymore because he doesn't want to pick up penalties. I mean, they went down to the New Jersey Devils. There's McDermott there. There's no reaction from Arbor Jacka. I know he's not scared of him. They play Toronto. They're down in that hockey game. You're looking for a spark. There's Ryan Reeves on the other side. There's no reaction from Arbor Jacka. I almost feel like they've sucked the life out of him a little bit.
I've talked about this before with Mitch Melnick, and I think I've talked about it with you before too. Chris Nyland's there. He's around. He's an ambassador for the group. I don't know how much, the internal coaches are actually dealing with Arbor in terms of this is how you perform your role. But there's a certain way to do that role. I've had different guys, whether it was Jim McKenzie, who was really tough, or Billy Heward in Ottawa, or Denny Vial in Ottawa, Jay Caulfield in Pittsburgh, Troy Loney in Pittsburgh. I have different guys that played that role. There's an art to it, Tony. It's not just you get out and you drop your gloves. There's a way of doing that role. And Chris was really good at it. As you know, Chris Nyland was outstanding at it. And I don't know. He said, I've talked to Chris about it. He said that he has talked to Arbor, but maybe they need somebody to be a little bit more proactive with him.
Well, look, they brought Mark Bureau on the ice about a week ago to help the team with faceoffs.
Yep.
So they brought in somebody who was a specialist in his role. And that's exactly what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Bring in somebody who was a specialist at his role.
Yes, I am saying that.
Yeah. The fact that, I get it. Michael Pezzetta is a 13th player on a National Hockey League team, with all due respect to him, maybe even a 14th on some teams and on some Stanley Cup contenders. Maybe he's in the American Hockey League. But when a team is missing an identity, like if I'm Michael Pezzetta, I'm sitting and I'm watching the games right now. Don't get me wrong, all right? The Canadiens didn't lose because Michael Pezzetta is not playing. I'm not saying that, but if you're looking for energy, I'm watching the game right now and I'm saying, okay, they brought up Lucas Condotta, who's playing on the fourth line. I can't play there?
Well, Condotta, I think, is up there for faceoffs too.
Yes.
It's a little bit different than Pezzetta. But no, I understand your point. And you raised the point about Heineman, and it's not an unfair point. I mean, is that where his career is going to be as a fourth-line player? I don't think so. I don't see it.
So Raphael Harvey-Pinard was hurt in the offseason. He's broke his leg, and he's back, all right? He's been practicing now in a contact jersey, so he should be back anytime. I don't know if they're going to send him to Laval for conditioning before he actually plays with the big team. But once he plays, I mean, here's a guy who can provide energy, Pierre.
Mm-hmm.
He's another 5'9" player, though.
I know. And so here's one thing, and I know people don't want to hear this, but I'm watching Owen Beck play. I'm watching Joshua Roy play. Alex Barré-Boulet. You look at all these guys, Tony. They're putting points up. They're scoring. And if you're going to make it a situation where it's all about competition and competing for your ice time and competing for a job, at some point the guys that are producing points are going to get an opportunity to play in the NHL. They just are.
All right. Okay. Where do we go from here? The Montreal Canadiens lose by a score of 3-0 to the Minnesota Wild, and I'm trying to find a bright spot, and I think I found one. Jake Evans was 73% in the circle tonight, so
yeah,
there you have a bright spot, I guess. Evans is 73% in the circle. The Canadiens did pretty well in the face-off circle tonight, but that's about it. Pierre, when a team, and I was asked this earlier this morning on my radio show, but and I don't know the answer for it, but I guessed at the answer, so you tell me. But is it in their heads when they hear that their organization hasn't won in a certain building in 13 and a half years?
I think it's in both teams' heads because the rosters change over 13 and a half years. But people still talk about it. I talked to Billy Guerin about that too. And he says, we're just worried about tonight. We're not worried about what happened in years past. But it still gets brought up, and it is a little bit of a negative drain on your team. There's no question. I remember coaching in Pittsburgh, and forever, Pittsburgh never won in Philadelphia. But the year I got there, or the year before even, they started to get a little traction, and, we'd go into Pittsburgh or Philadelphia, and we were not afraid to play in there because we had built up some traction. So I think that's something that eventually they'll have to do. Obviously, they're not going back to Minnesota this year, I don't believe, unless they play them in the Stanley Cup final. So it won't be this year. But, yeah, no, it's a problem. There's no question about it.
For all of you watching right now on YouTube, for all of you watching right now on Facebook, you can get in your questions. Put your questions down on Facebook right now or on YouTube. And Sammy and Agnello, our master control, are basically going to bring them up for me, because it's going to be your opportunity to ask Pierre. Once again, Pierre McGuire will have exclusive Montreal Canadiens post-game coverage right here on the Sick Podcast. And the McGuire Report is brought to you by Vago Restaurant. My buddy Angelo and Tommaso run a great spot there on Green Avenue. And it's one of Pierre's favorite restaurants, I would say, not only in Montreal, but in the country. They've been open 23 years. Pierre and his mom are regulars there, open 23 years. So that's longevity. When a restaurant's open for 23 years, it's because they have the secret recipe to great food, great service, and great pricing to go along with it. Not many restaurants are open that long. Private dining, room for any occasions, whether it's a birthday, an engagement, a corporate meeting. Plenty of free parking after 6 p.m. Open Monday to Saturday, evenings and lunch, Tuesday to Friday. Fresh quality ingredients, old world Italian classics, and new Italian. Vago Italien. It's Vago Restaurant at 1336 Green Avenue in Westmount. For reservations, jot down this number. You can give them a call tomorrow at 514-846-1414. 514-846-1414. Without further ado, I think Salmon and Yellow are going to bring up some of those questions. Pierre, what do you say to ask Pierre some questions here?
Let's go.
Okay, all right. Let's bring them up. David says, Habs power play is in the top 10. That said, why not have Hutson on with Matheson and Dach off the power play? Pierre, I know it all depends on personnel, but with the Canadiens personnel, are you a fan of 4 forwards and 1 defenseman? Are you a fan of 3 forwards and 2 defensemen? I'm not going to ask you if you're a fan of 5 forwards, because that would mean leaving Lane Hutson off the power play. And I know you don't want to do that. So
No.
How do you see it?
So I think on the first power play, it's 4 forwards and 1 D. I think on the second power play, when the time's running out, it's 3 forwards and 2 defensemen. So you don't get caught giving up a potential shorthanded opportunity or somebody coming out of the box and you have a forward not paying attention or you have a bad line change. So, no, I think to start, it's 1 defenseman and 4 forward, which now, I said before the season, I said it to you this summer, Tony, I thought their power play would be at 23% or higher. I believe that it is better than 23% right now. I think it'll stay there most of the year. I think it would go a little higher if Lane was making the decisions on the back end. That's not to slate Michael Matheson, but I think Michael's playing far too many minutes, and that's why we see some of the defensive mistakes that he's making, because he's taxed out. So I prefer to see Lane Hutson on there. I think eventually they'll figure it out with what they want to do with Kirby Dach. I think everything's a work in progress right now.
All right. So if Pierre McGuire is running the Montreal Canadiens power play, he has Lane Hutson with?
Well, Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, Slavkovsky, and then I'd have to make a decision what I'd be doing with somebody else. Maybe it's Joshua Roy coming up. Maybe it's Harvey Pinard. But I'm not sure that Kirby Dach would be on my first power play.
Why not?
Urgency.
He doesn't play with urgency.
Not enough urgency right now.
To go out and dig up loose pucks to try and get
strong
first
on the boards, initiate on the forecheck. Retrieval. People forget this. Retrieval on the power plays. The top power plays in the league have unbelievable retrieval. They keep plays alive. They make it difficult for the other team to get the puck out and ice the puck. So I think that's one of the things where if you don't have urgency, it's hard to create that environment.
So basically what you and I have said tonight, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll say what I said tonight without saying it is, I can understand why Chicago gave up on him.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that. I think they were worried about injuries, and I think Chicago just wanted to trend in a different direction.
And and also if they weaken their team and give them a better shot at Connor Bedard, why not? But
I'm not saying that. All I'm going to say is I think they wanted to trend in a different direction.
I'll say that. But they probably saw the lack of urgency in his game, right? And the inconsistency and the lack of passion, the lack of compete at times. And can you recall a player with that kind of skill set and that kind of size who it took a while, top 3 pick, it took a while to get going, but once he hit 25 or 26, he turned it around?
I'd have to look that up over time. I wouldn't be comfortable saying that one size fits all. I'd have to look that up.
I got it. Does he remind you at all of Jason Allison, or am I out to lunch here or whatever?
No, Jason had a slick stick and he could force a lot of turnovers. Jason, he's tall and he didn't skate great, but I'll tell you one thing, he was a massive point producer and he produced points with consistency. He really did. If you were to ever have a chance to talk to Anson Carter, who played with him a lot, played with him in Washington, played with him in Boston, he would tell you, Jason Allison was a heck of a point producer. He really was.
I mentioned yesterday that 1 week after the Montreal Canadiens made that trade for Kirby Dach on the day of the draft in 2022, the Washington Capitals signed a 6'3" centerman who was also a former 3rd pick overall as an unrestricted free agent to a 1-year deal at $3.5 million. And 1 year later, they gave him a 5-year deal at $25 million. It's working out for the Washington Capitals with Dylan Strome. He's 27 years old, but it looks like he's finally arrived.
I think the biggest thing with Strome is at the beginning, it was all about power play, and he's a power play point producer. And then I think he realized, if I'm going to take this to another level, I'm going to have to get more encouraged 5-on-5, and I think he's done that.
Couple more questions for Pierre McGuire. Ted Stevens Ghost, which is probably not him, but it's a nice name. Did Marty St. Louis lose the locker room. No, come on. Like, how can you say that?
I don't agree with that. I
No.
don't think he's lost the locker room at all at this point. Where you'll know they lost the locker room, if he's trying to implement different philosophies or ideologies, and you see they're just not working at all. So one of the things they're trying to do is tighten up defensively. They've been tighter defensively. You can't say they haven't been. They've been tight. You know, they've been tighter defensively. So the guys are listening. They're paying attention. He has a captive audience. If you don't have a captive audience, you lose a room and you can pay attention to it. It's pretty easy to see.
Listen, I don't think he's lost the locker room. I think one of the things that's happening is that they're a one-line team, and if that line doesn't score, they're in trouble. That's right. Okay, perfect. Other questions? Ethan Graziano says, is Sam Harris another Sean Farrell?
No, not at all. He's a lot bigger. Sam's a good player. I've seen Denver play 4 times so far this year. I've been in Denver twice to see them play. So I'd say no. And the kid I saw tonight, Logan Sawyer, he's a 3rd-round pick. He's not like Sean either. Now, Sean Farrell, to be fair, has tremendous offensive upside. If you ever watch him in the World Junior, watch him play in the Olympics, he was great. The problem is the Canadiens can't have too many small guys. So I just don't know where he's going to fit in Montreal. And he hasn't had a great start to the year in the American League. I think everybody knows that.
Yeah. Next question. Ryan says, question for Pierre. Should the Habs try and trade an expiring contract sooner rather than later? In terms of expiring contracts, Pierre, Yoel Armia is one, Christian Dvorak is another, and David Savard. So do you have any thoughts on David Savard? Because everyone talks about how great a team guy he is and the fact that they're young on the fence, that they're going to have to keep some veterans. But Pierre, he's 34 years old and he's slowing down.
So he's a pickup probably for a team that's good. I think they have the chance to win the cup, and he's really good depth, and he's an elite penalty killer. He still is because he blocks shots. He's fearless when it comes to that. It's not a player you're in a rush to trade. I don't think they'll be able to trade Christian Dvorak, and if they are, they're going to have to eat some of the money. And they've been trying to trade Yoel Armia for a long time. I can tell you right now, I was working for a team where they offered Yoel Armia to us, and that was 3 years ago, and that wasn't happening. So, yeah, it's you can say you want to move those deals or those contracts. It's not that easy to move them.
They offered Yoel Armia to a team in their division.
Yeah.
Wow. No. Was that? But that was the previous general manager.
Mm-hmm.
Marc Bergevin.
No.
That was Jeff Gordon and Kent Hughes.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was part of a bigger deal, and I won't mention the other players, but it was part of a bigger deal.
All right, call you in 10 minutes. Go on to another question. Bobby says, would you call up Roy, Tuck, and Mailloux for toughness?
Well, Logan, to me, is an NHL player, and I think the Canadiens see him as that, too. You just have to watch the way he dominates an American Hockey League game. I talked to an American Hockey League head coach last week, and he says, this guy's too good for our league. And he is. If you look at what he's doing offensively, he definitely is. Are there things he needs to refine defensively? Absolutely. Can you live with some of those mistakes at the NHL level? I think you can. But I also think that what they're doing with Laval, Tony, is a tremendous thing. They're going to position themselves so that long term, a lot of those kids are going to play big games in the spring, and that's going to help them a lot going into next season. So I don't fault them for what they're doing. In terms of Joshua Roy, it's not so much about toughness. It's about him being consistent every single night. And in terms of Luke Tuck, I think eventually they will give him an opportunity to play up.
Two more questions for Pierre McGuire, and we'll call it a night. And what was a late start in the National Hockey League for the Montreal Canadiens, who usually play most of their games at 7. They play a couple at 7:30. This one here, of course, was at 8 o'clock, but it was in Minnesota, of course. Mind you, that first period absolutely flew by. There weren't too many stoppages in play. Mick says, hi, Tony. What sort of effects these recent losses may have on the young players? Pierre?
Well, at this point, I don't think they have too much. I mean, they want to win. Obviously, it's a much more comfortable feeling. But, when you're getting an NHL paycheck and you're playing for the Montreal Canadiens, I mean, you want to do everything you can to win. I don't think it's going to affect them long term. I just don't. Yeah.
I talked about Minnesota time, which is, it's they're actually an hour behind us. Isn't that something? All right. Okay. Did you hear what Jeff O'Neill said on his radio show on TSN Radio in English and
I did not.
Overdrive Toronto. Yeah. A couple of days ago, he said that he thinks there's a losing environment and a losing culture in Montreal. And because of that, he would send Lane Hutson down to the American Hockey League to play for the Rocket.
I would not do that.
Me neither. I understand his thought process, but the kid would be wasting his time at the American Hockey League. He's just too good.
These are valuable lessons, too. You learn a lot from losing, too. And you learn a lot being around an NHL environment. You learn a lot about time zone travel. You learn a lot about everyday professionalism. You learn a lot about dealing with the media. There's a lot of stuff you learn, especially if you're a go-to guy, that you're not going to learn in the AHL. That being said, the AHL is a heck of a development league. It's an outstanding league. It bothers me when people call it the minors. I don't think it's the minors. The American Hockey League is a much different league than what a lot of people know.
It's pro hockey. It's pro hockey.
100% it's pro hockey.
Yeah. So, and I'll leave you with this, but Kent Hughes said the other day that he's learning a lot about his players during the start of the season, like you just said. So what is he learning about some of his guys? Like, just name me a couple of guys off the top of your head, or I'll bring them up. What's he learning about Kirby Dach?
I think he's seeing that there's an inconsistency in his game.
What is he learning about Samuel Montembeault?
I think that he's learning that he's probably a backup goalie.
What is he learning about Michael Matheson?
I think he's learning that he's playing too many minutes right now and that Michael's a really good complementary player, but he's probably not a go-to number one guy.
What is he learning about Alex Newhook?
That there's probably a role that can be created for him that has not been created for him yet.
You ready for this one? I'll leave you with this one.
Yeah.
What is he learning about his coach?
I think he's learning a lot about Marty in terms of he's very confident in his decisions. I think he's learning that, he's not going to panic under fire. I think he's learning that he might still need some more experience or some more experience around him. I think he's learning that.
Pierre, do you know if Marty was offered an assistant with experience, either when he came in or at any point? We know that Marty in the offseason, right before the season started, brought in Roger Grillo. We know he's a consultant to the coaching staff. Yeah. We know he's not behind the bench, but he's looking up at the press box. But do you know if at any point Marty was offered an experienced veteran assistant next to him?
I do not.
Yeah.
I do not know that.
I'd love to know that.
That's a fair question.
Well, I'm wondering if Marty probably says, you know what, if we bring in an assistant and he doesn't see the game my way, because there's different ideologies. One could say, well, if he doesn't see the game my way, well, then he can complement me because, he can bring his strengths that'll support my weaknesses and vice versa. Or he might say, I don't want somebody here talking to me about defensive hockey if I see the game one way and he sees the game another way. Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely it is. Yeah. I'll give you an example, though. Like Drew Bannister's a coach in St. Louis, and they're kind of in a rebuilding situation. And Drew really, until last year when Brewed got fired and he got called up from Springfield, he got his NHL opportunity. And they said, we're going to bring you back, but you're going to have to get some experience around you. And they did. They brought in Claude Julien. That's a lot of experience. Stanley Cup winning experience. Coaching for Lou Lamoriello is a different kind of ordeal, and it's a big learning process. Coaching an original six team like the Montreal Canadiens or the Boston Bruins, that's big time experience. So, St. Louis said, we want you to come back to Bannister, but you're going to get an experienced guy, and they did.
Pierre, once again, what a huge night for the Sick Podcast, huh? Announcing that Pierre McGuire will be with us exclusively for Montreal Canadiens post-game shows. You can't hear him after a Canadiens game anywhere else. I think that's pretty cool news. Thank you, Pierre. We're really excited about it, and I look forward to talking to you again the next time the Montreal Canadiens play, and that'll be next week on Monday during the weeknight, of course, because they'll play again on the weekend. But for now, we have weekends off until Agnello wants us to start working those too.
Well, I'm really grateful to the folks at Vago. Tony, thank you so much for your support and your belief in me, and appreciate being on with you. I'm really looking forward to the rest of the year.
Thank you very much. There you have it. Pierre McGuire. Thank you, Pierre. Marinaro, shout out for Paul Montreal, PEAU, Montreal.com. They have different cosmetic services, the latest in cosmetic services, by the way. They have a game changer for hair loss. It's called the TET technology. It's an ultrasound technology to boost blood flow to your scalp, getting those hair follicles back in action. It's all natural, no needles, no pain, 98% success rate for ideal candidates. Check them out on Instagram at Paul Montreal. 2 locations, one in the West Island, one in downtown Montreal. For a free consultation, jot down this number, 514-989-7328. Once again, I want to take the opportunity to thank all of our sponsors being Energy Transportation Group, Bittt Tibi, Playground, Betway, and the McGuire Report, brought to you by Vago Italien, Vago Restaurant. We have an energy poll question of the night.
Energy poll of the day.
And it is presented by Energy Transportation Group. Let's get to it right now. We're going to bring it up, or you want me to say it? Why don't I just say it? What frustrated you the most tonight? That the Habs were shut out to a 10-forward team for most of the game? Or Lane Hutson was on the second wave of the power play? And no one did anything, by the way, when they took out his ankle or his leg or his knee. What frustrated you the most? Shut out to a 10-4 team, or Lane Hutson on the second wave of a power play when Hutson was going more so than any Montreal Canadiens player tonight? I think they're both frustrating, but it's the poll of the day, and you have to choose one answer. So there you have it. It'll be out tonight on all social media platforms. It'll be out tomorrow as well. You'll be able to answer it. Until next time, Marinaro, the Sick Podcast, reminding you all that we will be back tomorrow night, same time, same place at 10 p.m. But before that, at 2 p.m., I go live, as I do every Friday, en français. Demain avec Mathieu Chouinard de TVA Sport et Anthony Marcotte de BPM Sport. Matthew and Anthony will join me tomorrow, 2 p.m. live in French, en français. Have a good night, everyone. The Canadiens lose by a score of 3-0. It's a Sick Podcast. I'm Marinaro.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. LaBita.tb, embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.